Can you guys believe it's starting week 4? Isn't that just crazy? To me, that went so fast. I can't even hardly believe it. But I'm happy to be here, and I've really enjoyed reading your guys' discussion. Thanks for the emails. I love the videos, so keep them coming. It's going great. So just a heads up, like I have 3 videos linked below me that are not me. They are a friend of mine named Nikki, and she is a very wild, energetic, and fun kindergarten teacher. And her idea is catching those students, the lowest ones. And she and I kind of have the same mentality as far as like if you catch a net and you're catching the lowest of your students, so the ones that need the most need, your whole net's coming up, you're going to catch everybody on the way up anyway. So if you scoop just for that top of the top group of your students, you're going to miss all the bottom students, and we don't want that to happen. So we often joke about casting your net. So if we're going to cast our net long, then we're going to get all of those students on the low, middle, and high when we bring them up to the surface. I did teach with Nikki for about 5 years, and she really is as crazy as her videos are. But that's why she's so loved. If they are on Facebook, and so if you can't get on there, I can give you the link for YouTube. So if you just like hit Control and then click on the image, it should take you to a new tab, and you don't have to sign into Facebook. It'll ask you to log in or create an account, but on the bottom it says not now. Just click not now and you should be able to see her videos without having to go into there. So if you don't have an account or don't want one, that's totally fine. You don't have to have them. But she definitely picked high interest books that are quick to read, high interest, high vocabulary, and sometimes the vocabulary isn't even as appropriate as like academia vocabulary, but really what's our point with those children's books? We want them to get to love reading, right? We want them to race over to the library and fight over the books that everybody loves. So that's kind of where we are. So if you could check those out, that would be fantastic. So before we get into like what's happening for next week, I have to kind of revamp and kind of rewind and what we were talking about for chapter 2. I really enjoyed our discussions about what you thought children's lit was and what you found interesting in chapter 2. I have to explain a couple different things in chapter 2 that just was like almost aggravating to me as a teacher. So on page 59, they talk about Ruth Bothighimer. I think that's how you pronounce her last name, Bothighimer. And as soon as I started researching her, she's an amazing person. I have her up on my screen here. And if you want to check her out, I went to stonybrook.edu. And she's still alive today, but she's an expert. She's an expert in children's literature with a focus on fairy tales, and especially Grimm fairy tales, which is like amazing because, what a cool job that would be. So what happened is that she went through all these fairy tales, British, European, and she pulled them apart and she wrote new books about them. And what the thing of was, why do we have to have a heroine always be the girl, like the damsel in distress, and then the hero is always the male? Back in the day when these were written, that was kind of how those societal roles kind of fell. But she's questioning all of it, and I think it's pretty fantastic. I think I'm going to take you here to Thrift Books. This is another website, and it's got all the books that she has written. So Grimm's Bad Girls and Bold Boys, Fairy Tales and New History, Magical Tales and Fairy Tale Magic, Fairy Godfather, and Children, the Bible Children. So, I've never read any of these. I've read most of this book, like of excerpts, and it's great. The idea is just wonderful. So if we go back to here, what I want to show you, and if you have time or of interest of this at all, is that she wrote several different articles that appeared in different places, Vox, Huffington Post, Atlantic, NPR, and it's about why is it that we have these fairy tales that are so ingrained in, male roles, female roles, those kind of things still in our literature today when truly they weren't meant to be children's books at all. It's very interesting. I kind of just love the whole idea of it. So on the bottom of page 59, this is kind of like an example of that. So when she's talking about here the slippery genius of the Cinderella story. Have you read the Cinderella story? Like the old one? It's horrible. It's just kind of really disturbing. And it's disturbing because you're thinking, oh my goodness, does that really happen back in those days? Or is this something that we should be telling children? Or even as adults, do I want to read about this? And I'll give you an example, and I hope you guys picked this up. On the bottom of page 59. All right, don't laugh at my glasses. Give you guys 30 years and you're going to be wearing glasses too. So, on the bottom of page 59, Perrault is who wrote actually Cinderella, and he also wrote Donkey Skin. And he's talking about Donkey Skin, which is a lot like Cinderella. Donkey Skin is a tale much like Cinderella, except the heroine of the story has a different suitor. The heroine's mother, the queen, commands her husband on his deathbed not to remarry unless he finds a woman more beautiful than she. The king finds the search challenging, but he eventually stumbles on a solution. On top of page 60. Every day he studied charming portraits of suitable princesses, but not one of them was half as pretty as his dead queen had been. Then he looked at his own daughter and saw that she had grown up. Now she was even lovelier than her mother had been when the king first met her and fell head over heels in love with her and proposed. The princess was filled with horror. Yeah. Ew. Oh. So we're really telling children, if we're reading this story, that that's going on? Anyway. Perrault's tales were not told for children, they were not told or written for children, yet over the 18th century they become these stories that were like fairy tales. And the word fairy kind of came from, if you look on page 59, it came from when these ladies would go, this aristocratic women would get together and they would chat. And instead of gossiping about, whoever's down the street, what they did is they told stories. And those stories kind of got spun and spun and spun and spun. And if these women were telling these stories, they're not going to be childlike. They're going to be like, women telling the stories. And so that's why they're called fairy tales. So then if you look on page 60, halfway down that first paragraph, it says, yet of course over the 18th century fairy tales such as these were retold for children. Like fables, they enjoyed a renaissance in the 19th century through the publication of such works as Jacob and Grimm's first German fairy tales. So it kind of got translated, the stories kind of got flipped a little bit so it'd be children-like. Then of course back, in America in the 1940s, that's when the Walt Disney, 30s and 40s, that's when Disney came along and took those stories and made them more, we don't want to say user-friendly, but more like modern, where we don't have those hints of, weird stuff going on. But anyway, so when I read this chapter, part of me was kind of like, I heard that before, but I kind of forget it. Because, when you think fairy tales, you just automatically think Disney. I don't automatically think, like, incest. But funny. Okay, so your assignment this time is our fairy tale, and I think I showed you that video or that thing last time. So the top part is in one color, the bottom part is in a different color. That top part, the red part, is what you're going to be doing your discussion on. So you're going to be reading out of this book right here called Classic Fairy Tales. And if you don't have this, let me know. I did photocopy chapter 2, or the chapters, I photocopied chapter 2 out of this book, but I also have some pages out of this one I could send as a PDF. If not, everybody has this book. It's pretty easy to find. It was cheap. It cost me a couple bucks on thrift books, so it's easy to find. But I tell you, if you're like me, which none of you are, but if you are like me, this writing in these books is so small, you're going to need like extra thick glasses for this one. But I think you are going to find fairy tales this next week surprising, because if you've never read any of them before, it's kind of surprising of the language and of the content. It's very different than what we talk about fairy tales today. So when I was, again, going back to Ruth up here, when I was reading about her biography and learning more about her as a researcher in fairy tales, I was sold. It sounds really, really cool. I'd like to get to know her. Okay, so if you have any questions at all, just email me. You can also video. You could text me. You can email me through Dickinson or MCC, or you can put it up on the discussion and I'll get to it. So hopefully you guys have a great week, and happy fairy tailing. Let me know if you need help. Bye.